So today we're going to try something new and do a little bit of a short form kind of video podcasting. And I figured we would talk a little bit about something that typically comes up this time of year. We have a whole bunch of people thinking about incorporation as the new year is coming up. But there's a pretty good reason to hold incorporation unless you really have to do it until the beginning of next year, if you can. Nash, you want to fill us in?
Sure. I think it is funny because regardless of our industry, which seems like it's always on, entrepreneurs never sleep kind of stuff, we see seasonality like crazy. And towards the beginning of the year, I guess the end of the year, a lot of people are thinking about starting their venture in earnest. Maybe it's finally quitting the job and going at full time, at the end of the year, even bonus cycles and things like that. So there's a lot of energy that kind of builds up to starting a new companies in the new year. But there's a very funny particular wrinkle that makes it monetarily disadvantageous to start a company right before the calendar flips over, and that is Delaware franchise tax.
I guess it's important to clarify why that even matters.
Right.
It's because most potentially high growth startups or startups that want to incentivize employees with equity end up incorporating in Delaware because that is where investors have confidence in the case law and the business law and the precedent that's been set, how the laws can be applied. But a funny thing about Delaware is that they are one of the states that institutes a yearly franchise tax on businesses. It's roughly or typically $450 for a newly created startup. But the wrinkle is,
even if you incorporate on December 31st, you owe franchise taxes for the year. So what are we in? 2024. So if you incorporated on December 31st, 2024, the next day, Delaware is like, oh, you were an operating entity in 2024, therefore you owe franchise taxes. And franchise taxes are not like corporate taxes where it takes into account, your whole year's worth of operations. For most startups, their franchise taxes are minimized in the first, not even couple years, handful of years, 4 or 5 years, but you will still have to pay a $450 minimum. There's probably a technical caveat that it could be less than that if you incorporated with less than a handful of a million shares. But most startups in our industry should have millions of shares when they incorporate because they're going to need to incentivize employees with very small equity grants that vest over long periods of time. Therefore, you want a lot of shares to play with. So I believe, Pete, do you remember what the minimum share count is? I think it's like 5,000 or something like that. If you have more than 5,000 or 10,000, your franchise taxes end up being the minimum of 450 if you use the assumed par value filing method.
cool. So I guess the TLDR on all of that is if you don't have to hold your incorporation until January 1st and save yourself $450. If you have fundraising about to hit your bank account that is imminent and you need to get an entity set up, or you have some other compelling tax or compliance or real driver to incorporate in 2024, that's totally fine. Get what you need to get done, but you're going to pay an extra $450.